Hi everyone. Okay, so this again is another timed exam. This time I'm going to be looking at component 2. Again, you'll be able to access my answer and I'll pop any sort of relevant information in the description box below. So if you have any questions, check there first, but you can always pop them in the comment section below. This video was up on the old channel, so this is nothing new. You may have seen it before, but hopefully this will help you in preparation for the summer. Hi everyone, welcome to another video. So a few shout outs today. Thank you to Charlotte, our vlogs, and to Cassie who have all subscribed. Thank you for all of your kind comments that you gave me regarding yesterday's video on freedom. It wasn't my best because it was a text that I found particularly difficult, but hopefully you guys found it useful and you went and checked out M12's video, which I linked you to in the description box. So today's going to be another big video. This is going to be another timed exam, but this time for component 2. Just the same as with the component 1 video, I've made up the questions in about 10-15 minutes. They are based very much on the sample assessment materials, and the reason I've done that is so that you guys can see how easy it is to just adapt and change those questions. I know that a lot of you are wanting there to be additional resources and past papers and things, and you can make your own up quite simply just by changing a word here and there, but I'll go into that in more detail. I know that a lot of you have found these useful. Some of you have left comments saying that they're not particularly useful, but obviously I have to try and find something that fits for everybody. So if you do have any suggestions, things you want me to cover, please just let me know in the description, in the comments box down below, and I'll do my best to get a video up to you guys, because I am still doing a video every day this week to lead up until your exams. So a few details about component 2 then. This is on the 10th of June, so it's a week after your first exam for media. Again, it's in the afternoon, and you will have about a 3-minute clip played for section A, which is based on television. It needs to be about a 3-minute clip for it to fit in with the timings that are given for section A, and I'll go through that again in just a minute. Basically, it's an hour and a half again, and that extract could come from anywhere in your set text. So if you are one of the people who are studying Luther, it will be from that episode of Luther that you have watched. If, like my classes, you've done the IT crowd, then it will be from that IT crowd episode. So these are the questions that I made up for you guys. You can get these in the link in the description box. Basically, it reads in exactly the same way as the sample assessment materials do. I've set it out in exactly the same way as the sample assessment materials. And all I've done is change connotations of clothing to connotations of setting, and then adapted the questions based on that. So you can literally make these questions up yourself, use the same mark scheme, but just change a word here and there to actually give yourself new questions. And then for music video, these are the questions that I created as well. Just nipping back quickly to this page with the crime drama and the sitcom questions. As you can see in the box in the centre, so in this box here, the reason that your clip has to be about 3 minutes long is because you get to watch it once, you get 6 minutes after watching it to make notes, you then get to watch it again, and you get 2 minutes at the beginning to read the questions. So in order for those timings to add up, it needs to be about 3 minutes long to give you an hour and 15 minutes then to complete both sections of the exam. Okay, so it'll be about 3 minutes here or there to give you those timings. Okay, now the resource that I've used is from the IT crowd episode, and I take it right from the beginning to about 3:24. That should read 3:24. Basically, just from the beginning to where the window cleaner leaves his bike with Roy. That's the time. That's the little section that I've picked, and you will get to see it in this next section. So let's have a look and see how I get on. Okay, so just the same as with the previous video, I've got my question papers here, got my pad of paper, my visual, so the clip that's going to be played is just over sort of here where my computer is, and I'll put a link in the description to tell you exactly what part of the clip I'm looking at. With this first section, it splits down the amount of time you're allowed for each different section. So I'm going to be using my phone to time each of those different mini bits. So the 2 minutes to read through the notes, 6 minutes to make further notes. So there will be slight gaps in between me doing all of this, but it says I'll have approximately 1 hour 15 minutes to complete both sections of the exam. So I'll put a timer up to show you where that 1 hour 15 minutes starts, and then you can see how I work through this exam as a whole. As with before, I'll make all my answers available to you guys, and I'll put all the details and descriptions in the description box below, so you'll be able to practice this at home if you want. Okay, let's get started then. So the first thing that I need to do is to do 2 minutes of making notes, which is what I'm going to do now. Okay, so the first thing that I'm doing again is just highlighting all of these keywords that are in the question. That makes a really good use of your 2 minutes to begin with, and also picking out how many marks the questions are worth, because that's going to give me an indication of what time I need to spend on each of these questions. And then I'm going through and basically just annotating, jotting down the things that I already know about each of the topics as well. Okay, so now I am going to watch the clip, but following the clip I've got 6 minutes to make additional notes. So I'm just going to leave that there ready for after I've watched the first. Now when it comes to making notes about the extract, the first thing I'm going to do is to jot down any of the locations that I see within the extract. So things like the street, the office. The office is also something that we can mention in terms of the title sequence as well. And then obviously there's the countdown studio and also Roy's apartment when we get there as well. So I'm making a list of all of the locations that appear, just so that I know I don't miss anything. And then what we're going to do is go in and start sort of backfilling them with things that we can comment on. So colours that are used, whether it's high key or low key lighting, what sort of characters we see within those scenes, and obviously the suggestions as well. All right, so now I'm going to start the 6 minutes worth of notes. So we'll just pop the alarm on. So during those 6 minutes, really going through now and adding in and backfilling like I did before, all of the information that I can remember from this clip. So things like, as we said, the colours. So the fact that in Roy's apartment we've got those blue walls, that's really, really important, because obviously that's a very stereotypical colour. We've got things like the countdown studio, it's got very bright, very sort of fluorescent, high key lighting. I did put a comment in there that it also indicates a little bit of sort of intelligence of the characters as well, which is why we don't get Roy in there, because he's portrayed as being not necessarily as intelligent or intellectual as Moss. I didn't get a chance to mention that in the overall answer, but it's useful to jot it down, because if you have extra time left, like I did at the end, that's something that you could go back through and you could add in another paragraph about that to try and get yourself a few more marks. So it is worth going back through this. Now your notes don't have to take any specific format, they can be bullet points. So on my previous paper on component 1 I was doing bullet points, but here you can see I've written in more sort of sentence type notes. So there's all sorts of ways that you can help to prepare yourself for the task to come, really. And then I've starred the ones that I think I'm feeling the most confident about, so that I can comment on those in detail when it's time to do the... Okay, so now I get to watch the extract again, but I've realised that I'm not... If I watch the extract again and then have... Yeah, I'll have about an hour 15 minutes. So I'm going to set my timer for an hour 15 minutes just so I can get this started straight after I have watched the clip for the second time. Okay, so let's watch it again and then I'll get started on the answers for you guys. So during this second watch, Not a lot of notes for me to make, so you can see that I'm not writing an awful lot more. I'm spending more of my time watching the extract, but anything that does come to mind I'm just adding down as I go. And your notes, as we said, don't have to be neat, they're just something for you to help yourself with as you continue writing. So just jotting down the final few notes now so that I'm ready then to tackle the paper for sort of an hour and 15, as it were. Okay, so the paper's begun. Using the words of the question to help start your answer is one of the easiest ways you can go about doing that. So it really is just a case of sort of using those words to help you, and the more you use those words from the question, the more on task and the more focused you stayed as you go through. So that's really useful, and you can use that technique in all of your other exams as well. So my first paragraph is actually going to be quite wordy, and what I'm trying to do is to give a point from the question, or a point that matches the question, back it up with some evidence from the extract that we've just seen, and then sort of go into the deeper connotations to fully answer the question. And because it's 8 marks, you're looking at least 2 paragraphs, potentially 3 depending on the amount of time that you have, but you want to make sure that they're detailed. So if you think back to component 1 section A, the 5 mark answers that we do tend to be about a paragraph long, but it's not a very long paragraph. So here you want to have a good 2 paragraphs that are quite detailed. I go for the 3rd paragraph because I keep checking the time, making sure that I know how much time I've got, so I do have time to add in that 3rd paragraph. And that's obviously something that you guys are going to have to do in your exam, is to just keep going back, keep checking to make sure that you've got all of the answers jotted down. Okay, so just coming to an end of this answer now. And one of the things that I have to think about, and that you guys need to think about for the first question, is that because it's steps, you want to try and avoid repeating the same answer over and over again. So try and vary the points that you're making. So this answer is worth 12 marks, which means I'm going to do slightly more than I did previously. You already see that the paragraphs are starting to become more detailed. We're already onto that 3rd paragraph now. In my answer, I do reference friends, although it doesn't say in the question that you can do that. By all means, bring in other things that you've studied, show that you've got that wider knowledge. They're not going to mark you down for that at all. Moving on to the final question, which is 10 marks. I've made a sort of 3 bullet point plan. I think that 3 paragraphs is quite useful for a 10 mark question. They're not going to be overly detailed paragraphs, but they are going to be quite useful to sort of show a wider range of points. And I've actually started off with almost like a miniature introduction. You don't have to include introductions or conclusions in any of your answers, because this is not the same as an English exam, although it does use quite a few of the same skills. You don't need that introduction or conclusion. I've just included one because it really helped to get me focused before I continued answering the question. So that's something that you might want to think about. If an introduction helps you to keep you on track, then by all means include them, but they're not going to get you any more or any less marks. You won't lose any marks if you don't include one. The main things that you need to be trying to put into these answers, which hopefully I've got enough of in my answers, are things like our terminology, and not just the same words over and over again, but actually varying your terminology will put you higher up into the bands because it shows a better grasp and a better understanding of the course as a whole. You also want to try and mention theories, but don't just shoehorn them into your answer. So there's no point in just blindly revising theories and then trying to list them all in your exam. You need to make sure that the ones you're mentioning are relevant. So later on when I talk about Laura Mulvey, I've put that in a place where it's obviously going to make a lot of sense. Here in this one, I mentioned prop because we're talking about characters and character tropes, so that makes a lot of sense. But nowhere was it possible for me to really fit in about Todorov, so I'm not just going to put him in there randomly. And that's something that you need to bear in mind for your exam. Another thing that you need to try and include is reference to the key concept that's being tested. Now you can see what key concept is being tested through those bold headings. So for my second question here, I'm being tested on my knowledge of audiences. So if I can refer to audience, then I know I'm going along on the right lines when it comes to answering this question. You also obviously do need to make sure that your answers actually answer the question. Now in the case of stepped questions, if you get the first step wrong, you will still get marks for the rest of the steps. They don't penalise you and they don't take marks away for if you get part of it wrong and then that affects the rest of your answer. They don't do that. So I'm on to section B now. We didn't get a chance to highlight this in the 2-minute notes. I didn't do that because I don't know how they're going to organise it in your exam, whether they'll actually time you for 2 minutes or whether you get to see the paper as a whole. So here I'm going through and highlighting those key words of both questions. And then I take in the first question, which is the 20-mark question, and I'm making my plan. Now the way that I've organised my plan is by first having the 2 points come off for each of the 2 videos that you've studied. Because it emphasises the fact that you've got to mention both questions, if you miss out one of those music videos, then you're going to lose marks, and that is an occasion where you will lose marks. If you don't mention what's stipulated in the question, they will take marks away from you. So again, using the words of the questions to help get me started. And we know that this is going to be a really long answer because it's worth 20 marks. So this is very similar to component 1 section A, that 25-mark question. The only difference here is that we're not comparing, we're evaluating, and that means that we've got to give reasons, we've got to justify our answers. And it is okay in this instance to use those personal pronouns and to say I feel this, I think this. If your English teachers are anything like me, they'll have told you, oh, don't use personal pronouns, but here that's absolutely fine because you're being asked for a judgment. You can use those personal pronouns. That's absolutely fine. And you can see how detailed my paragraphs are becoming. So because this question asks so much of us, my paragraphs are becoming more detailed. And also I feel like I can deal with a few points together. So I've started off by talking about sort of the sexualization of females, and that links to not only Taylor Swift's video but also to Bruno Mars, so it makes sense to deal with them in the same paragraph. It just means then that paragraph is quite lengthy compared to some of the others that I write afterwards. So there's no hard and fast rule for how long a paragraph should be or how much you should be writing, like how many lines you should be writing. It's got to go on your feeling and also on your overall structure as well, whether or not you feel you can fit those together. And there's a lot to mention for this question. I didn't necessarily intend for it to be as, I don't like to use the word easy, but as easy as it was. Easy questions or questions that we think are quite easy can sometimes pose difficulties themselves. So for instance, for an easier question potentially like this one, you might find that you've got loads to talk about, and then you potentially run the risk of running out of time because you spend too much time answering the question. So there isn't really any such thing as an easy question. It does give you a lot to talk about, but you've got to make sure then that you stick to those timings and that you keep looking at that clock in your exam to really help you. So this is now my second paragraph. I'm still looking at Taylor Swift at this point, but in my second paragraph I talk about the things that are making me not as confident to fully agree with the statement. So the fact that she has this all-female cast, which obviously has more of a feminist perspective to it, because that contrasts what we've said before about sexualization, it makes sense to sort of put it in here. So there is a link for my overall structure as I'm writing this. It does sort of fit and flow together. And obviously this is where theories that we mentioned before, like the male gaze theory, Laura Mulvey, fit in really, really well. But other theories like prop, for instance, here doesn't fit in very well at all. So you've really got to judge it, and you've got to be careful with how you include all of this evidence. So the final point that I'm making here is going back to Uptown Funk. It's a really good idea to try and deal with those two music videos equally. If you spend too long talking about one and you don't bring in enough analysis from another, then that could stop you getting into the higher band. So always try and have an equal number of points for both of the videos. That'd be really useful. It just keeps everything balanced and gives you the best opportunity to get into those upper boundaries. And as you can see, I keep going back to that plan and crossing things off. They're not going to mark your plan, so it doesn't need to look particularly neat and tidy. It's just something there that's designed to help you. And you'll notice as well that I've not highlighted any of my own work. That's really important. You're not to highlight anything that you write. You can highlight anything that's printed, so the questions you can highlight, you can annotate, that's fine. But your own work needs to be kept free from highlighting. And if you miss something out and you want to add something in at the end, just make sure that it's really clear. Don't write in the margins, because you can run the risk then of making your work too difficult to read. Just put a little number 1 or a little star and a 1, and then add it at the end of your paper, and the examiners will be able to find that, and they will credit it and they will mark it. Now again, as I said, you don't need to put in an introduction or a conclusion, but I felt like after I'd done this answer, I needed to just summarise everything so that I fully answered the question, and I gave my opinion as to whether or not I agreed with the statement. One of the bullet points was to mention media contexts. I'm not entirely sure that I've done that particularly well, so that's something you might want to work on as you continue that paper, or if you're marking my paper, that's something that you might want to think about. Have I mentioned those contexts enough to get those marks? It depends how you class contexts. Mentioning a more modern perspective might get me up there, but it's certainly not enough to get me the full mark, so that's something you might want to think about if you're marking my work. And now we're on the final question. So here we are on question 4. This is the one that I was least confident about. So I think I made this question perhaps a little bit nastier than it could have been. But you've got to be prepared for everything, because particularly with this being the first exam, we don't know exactly what the questions are going to look like. We don't know whether you're going to get nice questions because it's the first year, or whether you're going to get questions that are perhaps a bit of a curveball. So you've got to be prepared to answer everything, even if it's a little bit trickier than before. And you can see that I'm starting to get to the end of this answer, even though I've got about 20 minutes left at the moment, but I've not really taken any breaks. So again, as we said with that first paper, you know, if you've got extra time, you want to go back, you want to check your work, You want to make sure that you know, if you're getting a little bit panicked, that you take a minute to have a breather, and the exam will count all of that, you know. And also, because obviously I've been studying these texts for sort of in depth for 2 years, I've got a very good knowledge of them. You guys have got multiple exams to revise for, so that will make a difference as well. But I do have less time left over in this one than I did in the first paper. So we're just wrapping this one up now, bringing this to an end. And that's done. Alright, so I've got 16 minutes left. So this is less than I had when I did the first paper. However, again, I'm not going to use those 15 minutes now because this video is already going to be very, very long. What I would do in your exam is, if you've got time left, obviously go back through your answers and start reading them and checking them. Particularly ones like the 20-mark question on section B and the 12-mark question on section A, which are obviously going to have a lot of weight to them. So you want to check that you've got everything that you need in those answers. Okay, hopefully that was useful. Hopefully you found the points that I made quite useful. I know that there was a few bits where I sort of get a little bit tongue-tied. We do have builders working on our house at the moment, and at one point in the video someone knocked on the door, so it was quite difficult filming today, but hopefully, as I said, you found it useful. If you've got any questions, comments, anything you want help with, please drop me a comment in the comments section down below. You can also get in touch with me through Twitter at media_revision. If you want me to make a particular video, then you need to let me know. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Hit the button down below, and if you hit the little bell icon next to it, then you get an instant notification every time I post a new video. Plus, you get a shout out if you subscribe. So it's win-win all round. I'll see you guys tomorrow for the next video.